This is Terms of Reference. I'm your host, Stephen Laddick. Bibhusan Bista is the CEO and co-founder of Young Innovations, a software development firm based in Nepal. With a background in technology, research, and international development, he has led successful projects around open data, transparency, accountability, and other development issues in collaboration with local and international partners. Bibhusan is an active member of the International Aid Transparency Initiative Technical Advisory Group and has been part of similar initiatives such as the Open Data Movement in Nepal through the OpenNepal consortium and the first Open Data Portal for Nepal. Prior to Young Innovations, Bibhusan worked with Bellanet, an IDRC project, and SAP International, a regional INGO in South Asia. Bibhusan is also a part-time faculty member at Kathmandu College of Management. I spoke with Bibhusan in Kathmandu, Nepal. Hi there, Bibhusan. Thank you so much for being on the Terms of Reference podcast today.
Hi, Stephen, and it's nice to be in your podcast. Right.
Where am I calling you today?
Actually, I'm based in Kathmandu, Nepal, one of the countries in South Asia between India and China, if people do not know that.
Well, we have a fantastic connection, so that's great. Sounds wonderful. Tell me, Bibhusan, what it is that you do and what it is that Young Innovations does, the organization you're working for right now. I come from a little bit of international development background. My professional background is also in international development as well as in software development. So at present, I'm leading Young Innovations as a CEO of the company. And what we do primarily is help development organizations, the NGOs, INGOs, World Banks, and other, take advantage of information and communication technology to do the work that they are doing at the ground. So we do not directly work as a development organization, rather facilitate the adoption of proper tools and technologies at an international level, at a local level, and even at the grassroots, and bring changes in the development context. You've got these two hats, development professional, software professional. It's not unusual in today's world to have those skills. Did you start as, a coder and decided that you wanted to get into development work, or was it the other way around?
Actually, I never thought that I would be a programmer when I was doing my college studies. But, unfortunately, I got a job offer even before I was graduated and then started working as a developer for almost 3 years. So I would say I was pretty good at codes then. But then again, there was this offer, vacancy. I should not be saying offer, rather a vacancy for international development, and which I liked. So I applied and got this job with Bellanet, an IDRC project back in 2005. Right. So that's how I started working as a programmer and then moved into international development.
And what was it about that was Bellanet that was so attractive? Tell us about that project.
Bellanet at that point of time was about, using strategic, it was about making strategic use of ICTs to foster collaboration among development actors, So Bellanet at that point of time was the entity that created D groups, which was a very primitive version of what Google Group is right now, for example. So, there were organizations working on development sector from different parts of the world. So back in 1990s itself, Bellanet was the entity that created D groups, which was about merging the functionality of email list with a website. Nowadays, it's pretty common, but back then it was the only thing. So that is something that attracted me, and we used to work with not many actors at a national and international level in different parts of the world. So it was all about how the thinking and living on how to make proper use of ICTs so that people talk to each other and people do not repeat the same mistakes and there's no repetition of whale. So that was something for me very exciting about Bellanet.
So If you think back to those times, what was the big success or the big challenge of Bellanet? And, is it still relevant today, or has it been superseded, as you say, by Facebook, by Google Groups, by, all these other technologies that are out there?
I'm talking about Bellanet days when before even the Google Groups or Facebooks were even there, right? So I remember we used to talk about content management systems and social network. So the challenge that we had as I see it now with Bellanet those days was we're perhaps a little ahead of time right? So we were talking about development standards in XML format. So it was really, very difficult for us to convince donors and others at that point of time. But now I realize that maybe we were talking a little in advance. Now, different, all these Facebooks and social media changes have taken up the world. So we were trying to do similar things in development context. So that was one of the challenge. But at the same time, the opportunity that Bellanet had was we were funded by IDRC, and there were a lot of international donors and community behind us, including Swedish, Swiss government, and so on and so forth. So the opportunity was to be a collaborating platform, a collaborating organization that would let these different development actors talk to each other using ICTs.
Sure, you've really touched on a interesting phenomenon. I think that, and you could tell me, that may still happen today, where the individuals who are providing money, the individuals who are the leadership in donor agencies or NGOs or those kinds of things, they're at the end of the curve, right? Whereas the innovators that you're probably talking to are at the beginning of the curve or beginning of their careers and can't necessarily influence decisions. Do you find that a lot, or has that bridge been gapped now?
Oh, well, to a certain extent that has been, that bridge has been, gap. The gap has been fulfilled. But still, these are two silos of people that we're talking about, the policymakers, the development agencies, and the technologists. For example, take, for example, Facebook. Yes, it has been used a lot by development agencies as of now. But again, it's only they are using it as a service. Still, we do not have a common platform where development actors come and talk to each other, because technologies, for them, creating product is one thing that they prioritize the most, whereas development actors, they think that they should be involved more in the typical development work, and irrespective of whether they use ICTs or not. So still, to a certain extent, yes, the gap has been filled, but still these are two different silos that I would consider. So that's why, when I started back in 2003-4, I still feel still not much of advancement has been done. That is where, in fact, there is an opportunity for people like me and organizations like Young Innovations to actually try to be a player to bridge that gap.
Tell us about Young Innovations. So was after Bellanet, was that when you decided to make the jump and help found Young Innovations, or tell us about that genesis?
Actually, when I was working with Bellanet, I really enjoyed my time. I learned a lot. I had all this international network and connections, and I could see what's happening around the world. Although I was based in Kathmandu, but I used to travel a lot and meet with people. So that is when I realized that there is much more that I can do if I have my own entity and is able to take decisions, when and where it's required. So that is I always had that in my mind. And also, maybe I was an entrepreneur inside. There was an entrepreneur inside me. So I always was thinking about finding a way so that I could fulfill my passion, which was development and software, and at the same time work for my own. So that is when I started this Young Innovations, taking a bunch of students that I was associated with, because back then I also which I'm still now, I also take part-time classes on software development and software engineering to undergrad students. So I teamed up with some of my bright students and their friends. So 9 of us got together and formed this company, irrespective of we had no big plans, but I said, okay, this is what I want to do. And we started with one full-time staff. Although the company was founded by 9 of us, we started with one full-time staff, a very typical IT startup thing, and one room, one computer. And now we're doing pretty good as of now, doing some international projects, working with many international development actors.
And are you exclusively focused on the development and humanitarian field, or are you also taking clients in the private sector and other places?
Well, to be very honest with you, we never thought that we could only focus in development sector, but perhaps because of my personal background, and I was steering the strategic visioning of the company, so I had connections with all these development, stakeholders, and at the same time, I think it was much easier for me to speak both, the software and the development language. That's why, we ended up getting more projects. We ended up acquiring more clients from the development sector. So, but we did not have any intention to start to focus only on development sector. But now what we see is we have established a very competitive niche in the development sector, and we also have a very smaller niche even within the development sector, and that is how we are now trying to focus a little bit on the development sector itself. Okay. But it was not very well orchestrated and planned. It just happened.
That's it's called an emerging strategy, right?
Exactly.
What's your favorite project you're working on right now? I mean, looking through your website, when I was doing research for this, you've got violence against women, you've got open data. Some of them seem super far-reaching, global in nature. Some of them seem very focused in Nepal. Tell us about your favorite project you're working on right now and how it addresses a social concern.
Currently, we have a couple of, we have 10, 15 projects running at the same time, but if you ask my favorite, it's a very difficult question because I like all my projects. But again, if I had to list in terms of my priority, the first one is something called aid stream. So what we are doing on that project is there's an international aid transparency initiative which talks about transparency in terms of the financial flows, the resource flows that comes from developed economies, developed countries to underdeveloped or, developing countries like Nepal and, maybe even Costa Rica. So that is where, this project is about. This is a product of ours which we've been working for past 4 years. So we know this International Aid Transparency Initiative, IATI standard. So this is a standard where people have agreed at the highest political level, which includes all the donors, World Banks, UN agencies, and other bilateral and multilateral donors. This is a standard way of reporting any instance of foreign aid that comes from one place to another. So these big political stakeholders in the development sector have agreed on a standard. So that is where our tool AidStream comes into picture, where we have now a web-based platform through which any organization, be it a smaller NGO receiving $5,000 in Nepal or a bigger agency which runs $50 million project in sub-Saharan Africa, they can now enter details and have it published in IATI standard. Right? That is what we do in AidStream. And the second project that I really like about is this violence against women thing that we are doing in Nepal. So in this project, what we're doing is we're working with the World Bank the violence against women is an issue in South Asia and perhaps in many parts of the world. But the problem that we have right now is the way it is addressed is still done in a conventional manner, whereby, a victim goes to file a report and then, there's a whole lot of paperwork. And by the time the victim gets justice, it might already have been too late. That is where we are using the power of SMS, the power of voice telephony, the power of, mobile app, an integrated web platform through which, any victim that comes, that reports through a toll-free number, in Nepal, for example, where we are piloting, the call gets recorded in an asterisk server and then it is sent to a custom-built case management system, which can be accessed by government agencies, the police, and other NGOs working on the field of violence against women. So thereby we have used all the possible ICTs to address that issue, so that this can be a one-stop pilot, one-stop solution to address the issues of violence against women. So this is where we have exploited the power of technology, like anything, to kind of act upon a global and burning issue which is on violence against women. Right?
At what point or how do you manage that project beyond the walls of Young Innovations? So I'm thinking, the data transparency initiative. How are you? Is someone else managing the watchdog nature of, hey, donor, you need to report on this? Are you handing that off to another agency, or do you also manage it in-house?
Well, actually, we're developing products, and we try to institutionalize that within existing context in different countries. But the way we're doing it is we are not advocates for ourselves. For example, if you talk about aid stream, it is directly linked with the IATI initiative, IATI, International Aid Transparency Initiative. There is this global movement around aid transparency saying that people need to know like what has been given to recipient country by the donor country, so on and so forth. There is this global movement, and aid stream comes as a tool which people can use to in alignment with that transparency movement. So we're not just doing a global advocacy ourselves. Rather, we work with that community to develop compatible product or a tool that people can use. And same with violence against women. Like the government of Nepal, the Nepal police, and everyone is working. There are more than hundreds of organizations working on the issues of violence against women. So what we're doing with our fight violence against women tool is that we're linking all these stakeholders together using ICTs so that they can leverage on collaborative possible collaboration and provide assistance to the victim of violence. So we work in tandem with different stakeholders. We do not work in silos and try and give a message that we know everything. We know nothing about social issues. What we know is that there is a social issue and there are some ways to address that, and which is about using ICTs.
I want to change the conversation to look at how you compete basically in this world. First, sort of maybe a practical question. When most people think of Nepal, at least from outside Nepal, they think of the Himalayas. They think of climbing Mount Everest, these kinds of things. And here you are, high technology in Kathmandu. What's the IT infrastructure like there? Our connection here over Skype is fantastic. Clearly, you're developing high technology solutions for aid agencies. Are you cutting edge? Do you feel like you've got everything Silicon Valley does, or?
Well, unfortunately not, but in a way, yes, as well. It's like what we have that I consider the biggest asset is like we have the skill set. Like for example, I am also involved in teaching in one of the universities, and looking at these people, I can compare the developers in my team and possibly not many outside my team as well. I can compare them with the developers in India or even in Silicon Valley, because thanks to internet, people are exposed, and there's like a lot of emphasis these days, even in Nepal, in terms of getting things right. So if there is a new programming language launched or a new tool developed or a new framework developed in Silicon Valley, our developers are the ones who get it tomorrow morning and would want to talk about that. So that is the biggest thing. But in terms of infrastructure, we are terribly behind. We have a very good internet connection, but this is I would say for this connection, you would pay not even 1/20th of what I'm paying right now in the US. It's very expensive. And we have other infrastructure issues during dry seasons, we have 18 hours of power cut, right? So we basically rely on, diesel gensets, so on and so forth. So the infrastructure issue is there, but what I'm saying now is since we already have the major ingredient, which is the skill, the knowledge, the people, right? That asset is already there. So despite all the infrastructure hurdles, I think we have everything that it takes, because it is people who are very skilled, who are very knowledgeable, and who have this attitude to be the best in the world. So that is how I think we are able to compete at a global level.
And just to want to give you a compliment, I think you've hit it on the head. Once you have the special sauce is the people. You can work around all the other things. So right. How do you compete for your time, or how do you divide your time amongst competing for new work, developing existing work, and managing projects that you've completed and put out into production?
Well, the way I try to do is I'm very, very lucky in the sense to have a wonderful team. We have very good co-founders and managers and developers working in a team. So the way we do our business is we just do not go out there in the market and compete for work all the time. So it's the projects that we do, we try to make sure that we give our full effort to that, and we try to give the best of what we have. So based on that, most of the clients that come to me is normally based on referrals. I hardly remember any client coming to me out of the competition. Yes, we have had some, I think over the past 2 years, I think we competed not even 2 or 3 bids, at a publicly. It's rather the referrals that my clients give saying, okay, these people from Young Innovations are really good, and, maybe you would want to try out our project. So that is how I get my business. And the other thing that I do at a personal level is, I get invited to a lot of international workshops and seminars, and where I talk about my experience, the projects that we have done. And for me, that is a very good marketing avenue where I get to meet with people, at a global scale in different parts of the world and talk about my work and possible collaboration. That is how I do. And regarding implementation of the projects, we have a very autonomous team. We follow this agile approach. So there is, team for all the projects. There are cross-cutting teams, helping other different project teams. So it's we know what we need to deliver, and we have some quality assurance guidelines, some internal controls and mechanisms. So for me, implementation of the project is not big deal because, that is taken care by my team. And, so that is where I think I'm one of the luckiest person to have such wonderful people in my team.
We're always really great at talking about our successes. I've been lucky enough to have been involved in quite a few software projects for the development world and the humanitarian aid world, and I know how they can get off track and they can take twice as much time, etc. Tell me about a time when, Young Innovations either failed or had, just a really difficult client, and what was your process for making sure that you were able to continue to deliver value to that client and come out on top?
I think we have many failures rather than successes, right? So, and this is what keeps us going all the time. We've had cases where, as you said, the requirement script, and you started with building X, and you had to develop X plus Y plus Z, so on and so forth. So we had many such situations, and the way we try to bring focus on our work is no matter what the client sees, we try to give out the best. That's number one, the recipe number one. And the second thing is we try to keep focused. For example, these days we do not do any projects. For example, we have our niche around transparency, open data, and mobile technology. So that is where we try to see, so the projects that we do is not only for my clients, it is also for us, So we try to make sure that we build a product or a service or a tool, that is among the best, so which we can take pride on. And for me, that is a way to go forward rather than, taking a look back and saying that, okay, this did not work, so we need to change path. Rather, we try to learn from every project and make sure that we identify our niche. And that is how we now have a very focused niche even in development sector around transparency, open data, accountability, so on and so forth, that we are trying to, cash on. Okay.
What's the next 5 years look like? You'll continue to grow. Hopefully the organization will continue to grow. You'll have developers come and go. Do you have a vision for what that might look like, or is it, sort of week by week or quarter by quarter? What does the next 5 years look like for you and for the organization? Hopefully, your organization will continue to grow, but I'm sure you'll have developers come and go. Maybe your partners will want to go do other initiatives. Have you thought about what the next 5 years look like, or is it still sort of what's the next quarter?
Well, honestly speaking with you, I think I do have certain plan in terms of where we want to go, but that is not a very rigid approach, So we've always believed in being an agile company where we change our path based on, what comes forward and based on the external circumstances. But yes, we do have certain strategies for next 5 years. So the way I see Young Innovations in next 5 years is our tools and products and services are being used internationally. For example, AidStream that I talked about is currently being used by more than 300 organizations in 16 different countries. But this is not something that we want to be happy about. We want to build capacities of local developers within different countries. For example, we are thinking about how do we, now that we have open source AidStream, I'm giving you a specific example of how we want to head, is now that we have open source AidStream, we want to build capacities of developers in maybe Kenya or or in Vietnam, and build communities around our product so that there is capacities at the local level to contextualize the product that we have created and use it for their own benefit. In that way, we want to be a global, catalyst based on what we have achieved and what we know can be done. And that is one thing that we want to do. And the other thing is we want to replicate the success that we had using ICTs for strategic development issues in other parts of the world as well. For example, this pilot that we are doing with the World Bank on violence against women, perhaps if it makes sense, we would want to be piloting similar thing at a different level in some other countries as well. That is where I see. And talking about my team, what I believe is the more we grow, there will be an opportunity for people to be engaged in a larger product. So for example, right now we are doing this work, maybe a web application that, is able to handle like 1,000 visitors at a time. So perhaps when we scale up at a global scale, we want to, have our developers enough exposure at an international level so that they know how to make that 1,000 users into 1 million users that can be handled by the website. So we want to build capacities of developers so that we are able to take the next big leap. And for the next 5 years regarding our thematic focus, I think it will be accountability, transparency, and open data the most. So we want to be providing services around these, especially not only to big donor organizations, but rather spreading out in southern countries, in Africa, in South Asia, elsewhere, and helping, country governments and smaller NGOs, use those tools that can help them be more transparent and be part of this data revolution that we're talking about.
Young Innovations is a dynamic organization, and you've said many times it's a flat management structure with little hierarchy. What's a typical day for you? How do you go through your day? Are you managing projects? Are you contributing to teams? Are you focusing on administration?
Yeah, we have a pretty flat hierarchy, but that does not mean that we do not plan. We have all the project management softwares and everything that is needed. So we have, as I said earlier, we work on teams. So there are group project teams, there are cross-cutting teams supporting on operations, there is a team on community building, there is a team working specifically around data issues. So there are thematic teams and there are project teams. So a typical day for me would be to, come to office in the morning and, talk to my thematic team leaders and my, project team about what is it that they are doing, any challenges that they are facing. And especially I talk to them about any problems that they are facing with the client so I try to help them in understanding the project and the development essence of it, not just the technical side. So rather than focusing on technical side, because I already said, I have a wonderful team of technologists working with me. So I let them handle the technical stuff. Rather what I do is I make them understand the basics of why we are doing this project, the development dynamics behind those projects, and so on and so forth. So, that is how I'm the one to bridge the gap between, the technology and development. And because I know that if we are to succeed in what we do in the development context, first, my programmers, my developers, my project managers need to be aware and realize the value of the work that we are doing. So this is what I would be doing. And of course, I'll be attending a lot of emails and stuff and, try to network with people. And, so we are part of many international forums and initiatives. So I respond to them. So, it's like putting myself in the radar of these international initiatives and domain. And at the same time, it's also about, learning. So I read a lot, I read about the transparency, the open data stuff and other things, that is related to our work. So a typical day would be something like this.
Along that line, two more questions. One, what do you find is your greatest challenge operating from Nepal, or just being in the IT space? Or when you wake up during, in the morning, you say, I really wish that I could do this. And that could be anything. What is it that you find is your greatest challenge right now?
Well, for me, the challenge is, honestly speaking, we have raised a lot of expectations for ourselves and for the partners and clients that we work with. For example, in one of the work that we are doing with a UK-based organization called Integrity Action, we have developed a whole new platform using mobile technologies for collecting and curating data from 12 post-conflict countries in the world, including Nepal or Sierra Leone or Palestine. And this is supposed to be maybe a little ahead of time, but this is about providing citizen feedback on the infrastructure and, reconstruction projects that's going on in these countries. So we have been with them as technical partners for the past 3 years now. So they actually rely on us totally in terms of visioning the next technology architecture or next thing around open data transparency as a partner. So the challenge that I have is like, how do we keep pace with the expectations that we have raised at an international level? Because being based in Nepal, yes, we do have pretty good connections in different parts of the world. We have a lot of friends and networks that we work with. But again, it's about living up to the expectation of people in terms of knowing what is needed, where the whole world is heading towards. For example, we need to understand the big data movement, the data revolution that the development sector is talking about. So for me, that is a challenge, and the only way we can overcome that challenge is by being engaged, doing the work, and a lot of research and study.
Just a few things that you want to overcome. So my last question is a question that we asked every person who comes on the podcast with us, and I think this will be an easy one for you because you work with so many young people. What is your critical piece of advice or your insight into what it takes to have success as a development professional or humanitarian aid professional? Is there something that you either provide advice to your young staff or you give someone completing their degree right now?
Oh yes, we do engage a lot of we engage a lot in community activation and talk with a lot of the students. And the one thing that I say always is like be the best in what you do. So that means like if I say I want to be a best company doing social media projects like Facebook. I cannot be. I know that I will have a lot of limitations in that. So for me to be the best, I think I need to first identify what is it that that I feel as a competitive advantage, and then try to sharpen skills. Right. So this is what I say to lot many youngsters who come to me, and I think everyone at Young Innovations is of that. So it's like no matter it could be a small thing that you do or a small big thing that you do, but you need to have focus, you need to be passionate about that. So basically, it will be like you'd be doing PhDs every month. You need to focus on thing, and then try to be adaptive and agile. And then, give flexibility, but be focused and, try to replicate the success and, do continuous research, learn, and so on.
Bibhusan, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Stephen, and it was really nice talking to you as well.
You've been listening to Terms of Reference, a weekly podcast from aidpreneur.com. Find us on iTunes or at www.aidpreneur.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.